The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I told you last week we would continue to follow the negotiations on the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is a huge kind of a trade and regulation and business enhancement, for lack of a better term, bill. And the latest news is that President Barack Obama's push to, quote, fast track the TPP has been at least temporarily blocked by none other than Democratic Senator from Nevada, Harry Reid. Harry Reid is saying no. He's just saying he's not going to fast track it. He opposes the bill that would fast track the Pacific Rim and European Union pacts through Congress, of course, with the limited debate and no amendments, which the White House insists is crucial to gaining concessions from other countries to finalize the deals. There is this tendency in the political world, Lewis, to create urgency where there is really no definitive need for urgency. In other words, the reason all of a sudden why TPP must be fast-tracked is because if we don't fast-track it, it'll eventually pass anyway, but we will lose the concessions we've negotiated with other countries. Well, listen, if that's the case, if such a huge deal that affects so many areas of people's lives in so many countries really hangs in the balance of fast-tracking it with no debate or amendments, almost no debate and no amendments, in order to maintain concessions from other countries, there's a problem with the entire structure around the negotiation of this pact.
Right. And that's if we even believe that's the reason for fast-tracking it, which personally I don't. I mean, it seems that this entire deal is a complete abomination, if you will, and hurts and will eventually just hurt the majority of American people. I mean, a lot of people are comparing it to NAFTA, which was a disaster. And it just seems to me that fast tracking it is a way to slip it under the radar.
Of course, big corporations would benefit significantly from TPP. They would have their power leveraged by strengthening copyright and patent law in their favor. They would also get more freedom as a result of very vague and I think deliberately ambiguous regulation, although it's not really regulation, it's really lack of regulation when it comes to protecting the environment. It's clearly a huge win for multinational and transnational corporations around the world. It's not clear to me exactly how Americans benefit from it, and maybe that's part of the issue. A White House official says that they are not surprised about Harry Reid's opposition to the bill. I'll be honest, Harry Reid to me is basically a status quo, plutocrat, duopoly, insider type of guy. To the extent that he opposes this, for whatever reasons he's opposing it at the time that he decides to slow it down, I'm in favor of that. And it doesn't matter what else I agree with Harry Reid about or disagree.
Right. It's a good thing. If anything, it will give some people more time to actually study it and learn what it's about. Will it stop the whole deal? Probably not, but that would be nice.
Let's talk a little bit about food stamps. As I have talked about for years on this show, the government spending money on food stamps is a really, really good investment. First and foremost, if you can get food stamps, in other words, if you are eligible for food stamps, you are at an income level where you need the food stamp money and you are going to spend it. Therefore, when the government spends money in a way that goes back into the economy, that's positive compared to the government spending money on a tax cut for the rich. Most of that money is saved. That's a positive thing. But additionally, we look at the multiplier effect of food stamp spending and see that the money goes to the recipients and then to the local grocery store, and then money goes to the employees of that grocery store, and part of it goes to the suppliers of that grocery store, and then the growers, etc. The economic stimulus provided by food stamp spending is huge compared to so many other types of government spending. However, the new farm bill, much delayed bill, has passed, and it cuts food stamp spending while Americans continue to be in poverty in record numbers. The Republican-led House voted 251 to 166 in favor of the so-called Farm Bill, which would cost about $950 billion over 10 years. Senators predict it will also pass in the Senate. The plan, which the Congressional Budget Office estimates will cut spending by about $16 billion over 10 years from current levels, reflects the clout of rural and urban allies who kept farm subsidies and nutrition programs together over Republican objections. Yes, they kept them together, as Bloomberg writes, but we see further cuts to the food stamp program. The most frustrating thing about the almost $9 billion cut in food stamp spending is that we're talking about metaphorical peanuts here compared to what is spent on the areas that we always seem to have money for. We always seem to have money for replacing all of those bombs that need to be replaced. We always have money for wars. We've got money for military spending. But for some reason, we need to continue to carve out little bits of benefit that really do help the people who are receiving these benefits. $10 billion over 10 years on food stamps, and yet we're spending countless tens of billions, hundreds of billions on wars and defense, and there seems to be no way to turn around the conversation.
I guess if you don't have an unlimited supply of $100 million drones, David, to kill terrorists in who knows where, those terrorists will just wipe out everyone in this country. So perhaps that should be our priority.
And remember that Monsanto and Pepsi and Dean Foods, all of their lobbyists really worked hard on this bill, and they retained most of the subsidies that these huge food companies receive. But we've got to keep carving out those food stamp benefits. We've got to keep removing them. We need to keep reducing because we just are broke, Lewis, which of course we're not. But when we think we're broke, apparently the first thing to go are drops in the bucket, whether it was Big Bird, as Mitt Romney talked about, or food stamp benefits. But we seem to be swimming in it when it comes to funding the military-industrial complex, the prison-industrial complex, the food-industrial complex, et cetera, et cetera.
It's incredible how much, how many subsidies there are for these giant food conglomerates and tax breaks for them, yet we can't seem to get food to people for some reason.
Edward Snowden has been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, saying that Edward Snowden has, quote, contributed to a more stable and peaceful world order by exposing U.S. surveillance processes and practices and forcing a new debate over security and privacy. Two officials from Norway have nominated the former intelligence contractor Edward Snowden for the Nobel Peace Prize. If he were to win the award, he would join Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, and of course, President Obama himself, who shortly after being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, sent a whole bunch more troops to Afghanistan, presumably to have to, I guess, out of necessity or out of policy or out of direction from above, kill many people. Question one is, how much does the Nobel Peace Prize really signify today in 2014 about your efforts to promote peace? And number two, does Edward Snowden have any chance at all of actually winning this?
Yeah, those are some good questions. It makes me wonder if this is another one of those awards that we just shouldn't care about. I think if the Nobel Peace Prize is good for anything, it's probably good for getting you more lucrative speaking gigs, right?
It probably is, and it's really incredible to me that we could have Edward Snowden. I don't think he's actually going to win. I think he has no shot of actually winning this, but let's imagine for a second that he did. If Edward Snowden was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, he would be simultaneously a recipient of the arguably most important peace-related recognition in the world and wanted for arrest by the United States, which is interesting, but not unheard of, actually. I did a little research. Liu Xiaobo from China is a Chinese literary critic, writer, professor, human rights activist who was calling for political reforms at the end of communist rule in China. He's currently incarcerated as a political prisoner, and during his fourth prison term, he was awarded the 2010 Nobel Peace Prize for his long and nonviolent struggle for human rights in China. Also, Aung San Suu Kyi is a Burmese opposition politician and chairperson of the National League for Democracy. And in the 1990 general election, the NLD, that party, won 59% of the national votes, 81% of the seats in parliament. However, she had already been detained, and she had been detained under the auspices of house arrest, specifically before the elections. She remained under house arrest in Burma and won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1991. So it's actually not unheard of, this incredible and just very open discrepancy between simultaneously, with the case of President Obama, being honored with the Nobel Peace Prize and shortly thereafter scaling up a war, albeit temporarily with specific aims. And on the other hand, with the Burmese and Chinese examples, being under arrest for your activism and at the same time winning the Nobel Peace Prize for those same actions.
Right. It is not uncommon. Just look at how many peaceful protesters end up in handcuffs on any given day in this country. It's incredible.
Glenn Beck is now piling on to the dictatorial allegations that came from President Obama at his State of the Union address, saying that if it comes down to it, he will start issuing executive orders to get things done. Yesterday, we talked about the absolute apoplexy from the right over President Obama using executive orders while completely ignoring or having ignored Ronald Reagan's countless executive orders, George W. Bush's, Bill Clinton's. They ignored those a little less, of course, since he was a Democrat. And now Glenn Beck is saying that President Obama has declared he will be America's first dictator. Let's hear it from Glenn Beck himself. I don't want to paraphrase him.
The worst part of the speech last night, I thought, and the speech was horrific from start to finish, were the continual pronouncements that he fully intends to trash the Constitution of the United States, to ignore Congress, the balance of power, and simply seize control and do whatever he wants to do over and over again. And I believe that every American should write in those diaries that this was the State of the Union where our president declared he would become America's first dictator.
So again, the number of executive orders over which President Obama is being called America's first dictator by Glenn Beck is a far smaller number than that which we saw under George W. Bush, under Ronald Reagan, like I mentioned. But as for trashing the Constitution and kind of ignoring the balance of powers, where was Glenn Beck when George W. Bush circumvented and modified law in order to be able to create wars at the push of a finger, at the sign of a letter? Where was Glenn Beck during that? Where was he? Where was he when so many other executive orders were issued by George W. Bush? I guess he wasn't as concerned. And to be honest, the entire concept of calling President Obama a dictator over these executive orders is so silly, because how many dictators, after becoming dictators, leave office peacefully 2 years later, allowing for the peaceful transfer of power to a democratically elected successor? Not that many dictators do that.
No, but his term is not over yet, David. Who knows? Perhaps there will be some executive order to eliminate term limits or what have you, and this dictator will just be in office forever.
The entire concept of Glenn Beck's predictions also has me a little bit tired, because they're all documented on video and audio. None of them seem to be coming true. I mean, for years we've been covering and talking about Glenn Beck's various predictions, which his followers seem to just eat up like it's being spoon-fed to them, and none of it happens.
No, you're right. His predictions are terrible. And who knows, maybe, I don't know if his fans actually look back on anything he says. He certainly knows how to hold their attention and how to fire them up. And maybe that's all he's doing.
On today's bonus show, we will talk about an incredible starvation experiment and so much more. DavidPakman.com/membership. Sign up, and then we will send you the bonus show and so much more. Back after this.
The David Pakman Show at DavidPakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our membership program is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Do you know why patriots eat turkey on Thanksgiving? Is it because turkeys are evil, socialist, liberal birds that need to be eliminated? Find out more at liberalbias.com. Today's member of the day is Daniel Henson. Daniel, you're a good guy. You're doing something absolutely important. You are supporting non-corporate independent media. You're really voting with your dollars. And I encourage you, our audience, to join Daniel. When I say this program is mostly funded by individuals, it's not an exaggeration. I mean, literally, the group of supporters that we have are what allow us to do this show and to keep it going. So please consider becoming a member at davidpakman.com/membership. And of course, we are interested in expanding this program to 5 days per week. So please check out our Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign to expand the show. Go to davidpakman.com, click on the blue banner at the top of the page. We have awesome perks lined up for contributors, so please check that out. 3 inches of snow in Atlanta caused a 20-hour traffic jam, people abandoning their cars, people sleeping in retail stores and supermarkets, and there is still horrific gridlock going on in Georgia. I don't understand this in the sense that when I read about 3 inches of snow or an inch of snow plus sleet in Austin, Texas, where Lewis is it just because people aren't used to driving in snow that this happens? People start getting into accidents? Is it because the public works departments aren't equipped to melt and clear snow? Because 3 inches in Massachusetts is really just business as usual. Very little, unless there are specific conditions where it's 3 inches of blowing snow combined with the exact right temperature that creates black ice. 3 inches of snow is, I mean, schools certainly don't close for 3 inches of snow.
Yeah, it's a combination of the two things you said. I know here in Austin, a lot of those highways are these just raised overpasses. Because they aren't touching the ground, they freeze very quickly. And like you said, the public works are just not prepared to deal with that. I was driving on there at about 40, 50 miles per hour. I almost lost complete control of the vehicle multiple times. I had to get off the highway and drive on roads that were on the ground because it was that slick.
Yeah.
Literally, you have no control over your vehicle. So it gets pretty bad.
So I'm curious, I've never driven in southern snow. Is there something that is different? I mean, you mentioned specifically these overpasses are freezing because they don't touch the ground, but is the snow different in some way where 1 inch is like driving in 6 inches in New York or Massachusetts?
As far as I know, no. It's just that people really have no idea how to drive in it.
Yeah. Well, in any case, 20-hour traffic jam, people just leaving their cars. I often wonder, what would I do if I was stuck in one of those 20-hour traffic jams? I don't really think I would just stay in the car. I think I would probably abandon the car as well.
You can't stay in the car 20 hours. That's ridiculous. If there were I don't know, a shoulder or something, maybe I'd try to get my car into there and just leave. But I would certainly get out of there.
I've often talked about this imaginary balance or seesaw where privacy is on one side and safety, security is on the other. And as privacy goes down, security goes up. And as privacy goes up, security presumably goes down. I don't completely agree with that. And we've seen that when we ask the NSA, for example, well, how much have you actually been able to conclusively prevent crime from happening as a result of the bulk spying? And we hear, well, basically they haven't really at all, or at least can't point to any examples. There's now a poll which asked Americans, this is an Associated Press GFK poll, which asked, what do you value more, your privacy or your security, anti-terror protections? And more than 60% of respondents say they value privacy over anti-terror protection. That's slightly up from 58% in a similar poll about 6 months ago conducted by AP NORC Center for Public Affairs Research. Lewis, do these numbers surprise you in any way?
No, considering that we have no evidence that these anti-terror protections are actually keeping us safe, these numbers don't surprise me. I would have expected them to be maybe even a little bit higher.
Here's the thing. These numbers swing drastically depending how recent in people's minds is the latest big terror attack. There is absolutely no question, and we know this when we look at the ease with which the Patriot Act was passed after 9/11. There is no question that if you ask people the exact same question a year after 9/11, 6 months, 2 years after 9/11, you get drastically different numbers. Now that the memory of 9/11 has receded further into the past in the memories of so many Americans, the numbers change. So the question then is, when do you get the most relevant findings? If you ask people right after a terrorist attack, if you wait until more and more people have forgotten the terror of that terrorist attack, I don't have the answer. Which are the most accurate numbers? The one based in the recent terror or the ones based in distance from that?
Well, I don't think we should be using either of those numbers then if it's just based on someone's perception of an attack.
Well, my question is not which opinion should the policy be based on, but rather which opinion should we even consider the actual opinion of the country?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I would say not the opinion of those directly after an attack, because I don't know, you're in a state of fear and confusion just by default. I mean, I think if you have time to clear your head, maybe that's the opinion that we should go with.
Yeah, I'd be curious what people think about this. When is one's view on the privacy security seesaw, as it may be called, most valid, most valuable? I'm curious to see what the audience says. Some states are trying to stop the NSA at the state level. And this is written about extensively in Truth Out. Heather sent us this story. There's a handful of states around the country that are already devising plans to thwart NSA surveillance activity by stopping NSA facilities from having access to water and having access to electricity. 6 states so far: Missouri, California, Oklahoma, Kansas, Washington, and Indiana have introduced bills that target the NSA. They're all slightly different from state to state, but they would all impede the NSA from operating within their jurisdiction. In Washington, for example, the bill number 1 makes it so that state and local officials are barred from providing information or support to the NSA. It also forbids the NSA from researching and recruiting at any state universities. Any NSA evidence collected would be inadmissible in state courts in Washington, and businesses that have contracts with the NSA would not be allowed to conduct business with the NSA in any capacity. That last one seems like it'll hurt state business more than it will the NSA. But that being said, that's a serious thing. And lastly, access to water and electricity provided by the state to the NSA would be cut off completely. There's no doubt that without electricity and without water, the NSA will have trouble operating. That's absolutely clear. The question is whether there will be a federal kind of override here. And remember, for everything that states provide to the NSA, the federal government provides a lot or more to each individual state. And imagine if states say, okay, that's fine, or rather if the federal government says, fine, you don't provide us water, we're eliminating all of the funding for these programs that are available in your state. What now? I think states will change their mind pretty quickly.
They would, but would it come to that? Would that actually happen? I mean, it seems like certainly the senators and representatives in those states would, I don't know, put up a pretty big stink if something like that were to happen.
They would, but ultimately I think the federal government would have the negotiating power over those lawmakers more than the lawmakers would have over the federal government. I just see this at best, ending up in never-ending legal battles, again, filling up courts.
Maybe. We'll see. If the government can just kind of keep, the federal government can kind of keep the two separate, who knows? But of course, federal law does trump state law, so it could get pretty crazy.
It really could, and I'm curious to see what the federal government response will be to this, as well as what will be the practical application. What will the NSA do if the water gets shut off? And if and when that happens, that's going to be a really interesting story. Next, we're going to talk to Zach Coplin about the continuing pervasive influence of religion in science class in Louisiana. in Texas, and so many other publicly funded schools. Zach Coplin is next. Later, we will talk about a TSA story. We've got voicemail and so much more. Glad you're with us on this Thursday. Please don't forget to check out our Indiegogo campaign. We want to expand our show to 5 days a week. The goal is very simple. We need your help to do that. Go to davidpakman.com, click on the blue banner at the top of the page. It will take you to our Indiegogo campaign. Read all about it.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Zach Coplin is joining us again. He's a science education activist working on a campaign for evidence-based science to be taught in science class and a reinvestment in science funding. Zach, it's great to talk to you as always. You know, we outlined 10 or 12 things that are being taught in some Louisiana schools a couple of weeks ago, including that dinosaurs lived at the same time as humans, and so many other things on that long list that you're obviously very familiar with. You're now looking at what's happening in a public Texas charter, kind of like a super network. So explain what this is and what's being taught there.
Hey, David, thanks for having me on again. And recently I've been researching the Responsive Education Solutions Charter Network in Texas. It's the largest charter program in Texas with 65 schools, 17,000 students, and it receives $82 million yearly from the public. And it's teaching things like the fossil record is sketchy, that leading scientists doubt the mechanisms of evolution and the age of the earth, and that supernatural creation is just as valid of a way to explain the diversity of life on Earth as evolution. And this is not science. It doesn't belong in a publicly funded science classroom. And they also have terrible history, too. They're teaching things like the samurai were responsible for Japan's involvement in World War II. Problem is the samurai were disbanded roughly 70 years before World War II.
Well, the fossil one is interesting because it really gets us into what would be called pseudoscience, or taking the smallest element of truth and turning it into something it's not. Because yes, factually speaking, statistically, a very small portion of what was around when fossils come from do we now have as fossil evidence. That's very true. We make assumptions from a very small number of fossils about a lot of organisms. However, to take that and to say that fossils are sketchy and therefore this is an opportunity to interject, whether it's creationism or something else, that's where it gets very dangerous, because you take the slightest sliver of truth and make it into something it's not.
Yeah, and they also say things like there are no transitional fossils, which is just such a basic misunderstanding. Because it's a fundamental misunderstanding about evolution, which is continually happening. Every fossil is transitional because everything continues to change. So to say there's no transitional fossils totally misses the point. But it's a way to undermine evolution. Again, once they've undermined evolution, they can lead students towards thinking that creationism is a legitimate option.
So let's explore a little bit the kind of a public funding aspect of this, because if you have the conversation with those who want to teach creationism about the merits of creationism, you're probably not going to get anywhere at all. So it may be more important to focus on what is the legality of, in science class, not in religion class, teaching ideas that stem from sacred texts. So what's the legal status right now of that? Public funding here, teaching science based on the Bible.
Teaching creationism is totally unconstitutional. Same with intelligent design creationism, but the Supreme Court has ruled that creationism, in the case Edwards versus Aguilard, from my home state, Louisiana, that creationism is unconstitutional. In 2005, a federal district court in Dover, Pennsylvania followed up with the Dover versus Kitzmiller case, where they ruled intelligent design is still creationism and equally unconstitutional. So you can't teach that in a public school science class. The problem is we have legislation like in Louisiana, we have the Louisiana Science Education Act. In Texas, we have science curriculum standards that allow for both sides to be taught, for evolution to be critiqued. And that's sort of the way they sneak it in, is they say, we're just critiquing evolution. The problem is there's no real scientific critique of evolution. It's all the science is the science, and all the evidence backs evolution. You can't challenge it.
And I would even add to that, Zach, I would even say, if you want to challenge areas of evolution that maybe are not fully fleshed out at this point, or where there may be gaps in the theory, and you want to do it strictly from a scientific basis, if you can do that, I don't think anyone has any kind of problem with that. The issue is the bringing in
challenged evolution would be fine in a science class. There's just no legitimate challenges.
So where does this stand then? Because there is this, as you said, if you can kind of say the criticism, you're allowed to challenge evolution at its merits. If it happens to talk about creationism or intelligent design, you're getting into kind of a legal gray area. It's not necessarily the teaching of intelligent design, but it may be intelligent design creeping in as a criticism. What will happen legally with this?
So there's one point to also make on this, which is scientists challenge evolution every day. And the reason it's still a scientific theory is because it survived all those challenges. It's been challenged continually for 150 years. It's one of the strongest theories out there. And so there's no legitimate, you can't bring, like, creationism isn't a scientific alternative, and just sort of clearly establish that. And on where the responsive education solution stands, right now, the Texas Education Agency is investigating. I am currently skeptical that their investigation has any real meaning to it, because first they said that responsive ed the big investigation is coming internally from responsive ed. The problem is first allowing a creationist network, which is fully creationist, where their members of their top staff have said they view charters as a way to sneak religion into public schools. That's also part of this. Responsive ed is based off the Accelerated Christian Education Network, uses a very similar curriculum founded by members of the network, and is sort of meant to promote their religious beliefs. They've sort of allowed that to slip out. And so to allow them to do the investigation themselves is problematic, because they're going to come back and say, well, everything's legal. And they already have sort of done that. They responded to my article publicly where they admitted everything. They agreed that everything I published was true. They claim that it's all legitimate under under Texas science standards, and that they're just teaching both sides like they're required to, and that it's perfectly okay to talk about creationism the way they're doing.
And that is actually a problem, right? Which is the changing standards specifically in Texas, and also we know about the rewriting of so many of the books that are used. So even though you and I can kind of realize the absurdity of what they're saying, they may actually have some backing from the changes Texas has made.
Well, yes and no. So the thing, they have some protection because of the standards in Texas, but on a fundamental level, those standards are not a legitimate protection. Texas science standards do not trump the U.S. Constitution. So when they're violating the First Amendment, it doesn't matter what Texas science standards say. They still cannot do it. And that's the problem they don't understand. And so they've admitted everything publicly and have basically said it doesn't matter. We're still going to keep teaching it, and we're proud to keep teaching this. And then the Texas Education Agency informed me that while they're looking at the curriculum, at the time they did not say anything that violates the law. So I
think that's giving us quite a preview into the way they're going to ultimately side on this. Yeah,
which means that the easy option would be for the Texas Education Agency to remove the schools, to make sure they cannot use this curriculum, to make sure that Texas schools are teaching science. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. So this looks like it's going to come down to a court case eventually. I don't have standing to file. All I could do is really write about this. But I've already heard from some teachers at Responsive Ed, not on the record, but they want to remain anonymous. But they told me that what I exposed was only the tip of the iceberg, and there's tons of problems in these schools. And I'm imagining that either a parent or a teacher at some point in the near future might want to launch a legal suit.
And parents whose children are being taught would have standing, correct?
Yes, they would a parent whose children has been taught creationism. Any parent in Texas at a responsive ed school could sue the program because their rights have been violated. And I would not be surprised to see that happen in the near future. If Texas always could nip this in the bud. The Texas Education Agency could shut down the program, get rid of this curriculum, make sure that real science is being taught. And I'm hoping they do that because the investigation is not over. There's nothing officially out about this, but I'm not hopeful that they'll do the right thing.
All right, science in science class. I know it's crazy in many parts of this country. We've been speaking with Zach Coplin. He's a science education activist. He's working on a campaign for evidence-based science to be taught in science class. Keep up the great work, Zach, and we'll have you back anytime.
All right. Thank you so much for having me on.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The legalization of marijuana in Colorado and Washington state are creating some really funny situations with the TSA where, as written about by the Associated Press, it is now easier in a way to get through TSA security with marijuana than it is with water. This just really shows us where we are today. Voters in the two states that approved legalizing marijuana for adults over 21 now are inviting or dealing with this very odd situation where if they try to get through TSA with water, they would be turned away. But if they try to get through the TSA, and they will be forced to pour it out, in fact, whereas if they get through TSA to TSA with marijuana, it's less clear what happens. Certainly the TSA cannot confiscate it. Of course, the legalization within Colorado and Washington is not meant to allow people to transport marijuana into other states where it is against the law. But there's this incredible kind of legal ambiguity that's going on now. In Colorado, there are bans in airports, in some airports, from having marijuana. And there can be penalties as high as $2,500. You might even have to stay in a jail at the airport for some time. But it has not happened. So far, nobody is being fined. And carrying marijuana into a civilian aircraft is illegal under federal regulations. But still, there are many reports of people who are easily getting through TSA with marijuana, but of course being turned away if they have water. This is interesting. And again, it's kind of like with internet law, where the law around the internet doesn't seem to actually reflect how the internet is used. And much of what has developed around the airport security, TSA, anti-terrorism, global war on terror regulations seems to not really reflect reality, in the sense that, yes, you can't get through with water. It's possible that you could have explosives in the water or something else, apparently. But with marijuana, now that it is legal, the legal situation is less clear in practice. I understand that on paper, you're not allowed to bring marijuana onto airplanes, and airports individually are banning it, but people are getting through with it.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's some discretion now on the part of individual TSA agents when these situations come up. And I can speak from my experience that it's even easier to get onto a plane with a large knife as opposed to a bottle of water.
That's right. If people don't remember, Lewis brought it was part of one of these multi-tools, but there's no question that it had a large blade that by itself would be a knife that is not allowed. And Lewis just walking right onto an airplane with a large knife in his carry-on. Very, very interesting. So legally, the TSA typically hands over anybody who has drugs to local law enforcement. Of course, in Colorado, with marijuana being legal, law enforcement doesn't really get involved because it's illegal. It's against regulations by statute to have marijuana in the airports, but it is not really a crime. And it's just this very bizarre, strange situation. I wonder if Denver Airport, which has a cigarette smoking, almost like a box where people can go in to smoke their cigarettes, shouldn't they also have one for marijuana? I mean, it is not allowed at the airports, but legally speaking, I don't understand the legal justification for having a cigarette smoking box at the airport and not a weed smoking box.
Maybe they will eventually.
Yeah, I don't know. We are going to really be up against a very strange transition period as more states begin to decriminalize and legalize marijuana, where questions of weed smoking boxes at airports will be a legitimate question, at least at some point. So some people, a bunch of people actually, emailed me in the last week saying they are aware of my impending 30th birthday. Believe me, I am very, very aware of it. Actually, since like a month before I turned 29, I have been very aware of my 30th birthday coming up. I don't like it. I may be having like some kind of existential crisis, Lewis. And I know that, when you think about, I don't know why, when you're 25, the number of years of average life expectancy that you have left is not that different than the number when you're 30, but it feels very, very different.
It's just got a ring to it. I don't know, that nice rounded off number, 30 and 40 and 50. I think these are all, and 60. I mean, they all seem to have a special place in our minds.
Yeah, but interestingly, I don't really remember that same feeling when I turned 20.
Well, that's because you were looking forward to 21 so much.
Right, so I could go to bars and hang out with all my friends who were already 21 that had to ditch me every night. Actually, Lewis was really the worst. Lewis was like one of the youngest people in our graduating class, so you really were like the last person to turn 21.
I was, in our entire group of friends. Yeah, I was the very last one.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I also, the other thing is, when I think about like 1996, for example, 1996 is still about 10 years ago in my mind. Everything that was around in 1996, when I hear Third Eye Blind, I'm like, yeah, they were popular like about 10 years ago or something like that. And then you start adding up and you say, oh, actually, it's been close to 20 years since that TV show or that movie. Or, when I scroll by Independence Day with Will Smith on television and I say, yeah, this isn't really that old of a movie. And I'm watching it and I say, it really doesn't look very good. It looks kind of grainy and it just doesn't really look that good. And then I look at the year and it says 1996 and I say, wow, I'm getting old.
Yeah. I the same thing happens to me. I can't really explain it. I don't know. I like to think I'm not stuck back there, but I guess we are in a manner of speaking.
Well, it's funny because when I was younger, I would hear from older people when a certain song comes on the radio or a certain person is interviewed by Jay Leno, and I don't know who they are, and the person says, how do you not know who this is? This person was huge in my day. And I remember thinking, whatever, who cares? Like, it's over with. Other people are popular now. And now when I talk to 18-year-olds and they say, hey, did you know that Gwen Stefani had this other band before she was a pop singer? It was like a rock band or something. And I say, of course I know that. Of course, how could you not know about? No doubt. And I have the same feelings that I now realize the 50-year-olds had, or the 40-year-olds, when they were telling me, how do you not know about this movie? This person was huge.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about now. Even with dumb things like cartoons we used to watch, I'll talk to someone and they'll have no idea what I'm talking about, what I'm referencing, and it does make me feel a little old.
For everybody who emailed me asking what I want for my birthday, people offering to send birthday gifts, I'm not big on stuff. Honestly, my biggest goal for the next couple of years is to expand the show as much as possible. This is really what I'm invested in. So the best gift is, for my 30th birthday, either make a contribution to our Indiegogo campaign or get a membership. This is really the main project. This is the coolest thing that I'm involved in right now. So skip the gifts. If you want to send something, consider signing up for membership. That's more than enough. Let's go to some voicemails. 219-2-David P. A lot of voicemail about the interview with Pastor Carl Gallups earlier this week. Let's take a listen.
Yo, David P. It's Patty D from Minneapolis. So I was obviously watching all your shows, and I saw the Carl Gallups interview and his illogical answer to your question.
Right.
And with the ending, and the fans will decide. So I took it upon myself to go to his Facebook page and write, because there was no way I could message him. Just I thought your question was, or your answer was illogical, and he would comment back in the comment screen. Long story short, I didn't say anything other than that, hey, you should do it. He said, no, I don't want to do it. I said, David would love to have you back. I'm sure he would. David's, a very good guy. And he blocked me. I didn't do anything. He just blocked me.
Yeah, this is it. Today on the bonus show, or no, you know what? Today we have a full plate today. On the Monday bonus show, I will give an update on the entire behind-the-scenes fallout from the Carl Gallups interview. What you're telling me about being blocked, let me just say I'm not surprised, Patty D. I will elaborate on the Monday bonus show. DavidPakman.com/membership to sign up. Not only the bonus show, but so many other great membership benefits. And we will talk to you on the bonus show. And then on Monday, I will talk to you as a 30-year-old. It is depressing, I have to tell you. But that's what it is, and I can't do anything about it. And I will do the best I can as a 30-year-old on the David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.